If you had told someone 2 decades ago that by 2018 the company that commercialized chemical warfare and the company that commercialized Agent Orange were going to team up to control a quarter of the world's food supply, chances are you would have been labeled a loony. Unless your name was Robert P. Shapiro. He was CEO of Monsanto from 1995 to 2000, and in 1999 he told Businessweek that the company's goal was to wed 3 of the largest industries in the world, agriculture, food, and health, that now operate as separate businesses. But there are a set of changes that will lead to their integration. These 2 corporate giants are in fact committed to the consolidation and transformation of the world's food supply in the hands of the genetic engineers. Monsanto is one of the most hated corporations in the world. It is, after all, difficult to think of a company that has ruined the lives of more people around the world, either directly through its coercive and litigious practices against small farmers the world over, or indirectly through the pollution of the food supply with their genetically modified crops. Many are familiar with the company's sordid past, including its role in the development of Agent Orange and its contribution to the epidemic of farmer suicides in India. But in recent years, Monsanto has gained special notoriety for its attempt to push the boundary of patent law in a self-admitted effort to gain a monopoly over the world's food supply. Monsanto has been not just evil, but extraordinarily effective in spreading its evil seed around the world. Ironically, of all the corporations in the world, Bayer is one of the few that could compete with Monsanto for its position as the world's most evil company. Less well remembered is the fact that Bayer was the first company to trademark heroin, which they marketed as a non-addictive alternative to morphine and a cough suppressant. But it was under the stewardship of Carl Duisberg at the turn of the 20th century that the company began to develop its psychopathic character. Bayer did not just participate in the development and use of poison gas in warfare, they spearheaded it. In all, some 60,000 people died as the result of the chemical warfare perfected by Bayer and urged on by Duisberg, one of the great, largely forgotten atrocities of the First World War. Later, Duisberg wedded Bayer to the IG Farben chemical cartel. Bayer's Duisberg served as the head of its supervisory board. Joining Duisberg on the board was Fritz Termeer, who oversaw the construction of the IG Farben factory at Auschwitz, which ran on slave labor and participated in human experimentation. And in 1956, became chairman of Bayer AG, newly resurrected from the ashes of IG Farben. Decade after decade, the company continues to be involved in scandal after scandal, involving wanton environmental destruction, injury, and even mass murder. Indeed, it is not difficult to see why these 2 companies, each one a titan of its respective industry, each one guilty of the most atrocious crimes against humanity and the destruction of the environment, would feel an affinity for each other. But why merge? What does a pharmaceutical giant have to gain from buying out and merging with an agrochemical giant? Especially one that carries as much baggage as Monsanto. Integration of agriculture, food, and health is the goal. And once that goal is reached, the entire life support system of the human population, including all our food and medicine, will be in the hands of a few megacorporations. Indeed, the history of the production of food and pharmaceuticals has always followed the same trajectory, away from natural, abundant, locally produced organic materials, and toward artificial, scarce, factory-produced synthetic alternatives. Monsanto and Bayer, not to mention their cohorts in the agrochemical, pharmaceutical, and euphemistically named life sciences industries, are ultimately seeking the same thing: complete control over the population, from the genetic engineering of its food supply to the control of its medicines and chemicals. It is a race toward complete centralization, and with this acquisition, Bayer and Monsanto are getting a head start. Bayer, one of the pieces of IG Farben's grim and oligarchical legacy, supplier of chemicals for the poison gas attacks of World War I, knowing seller of HIV-contaminated vaccines, mass murderer of bees, seller of tainted GMO crops. And Monsanto, dumper of toxic chemicals, proud seller of carcinogens, suer of farmers, cause of farmer suicides, suppressor of scientific dissent. Are you feeling safe knowing that a quarter of the world's food supply will soon be in their combined hands?
In a groundbreaking decision, a jury in California has ordered Monsanto to pay $289 million in damages to a school groundskeeper who developed cancer after regularly using the weed killer Roundup. The 46-year-old man, Dwayne Johnson, has non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Doctors say he's unlikely to live past 2020. Johnson's attorneys said jurors for the first time were able to see internal company documents proving Monsanto has known for decades that glyphosate and Roundup could cause cancer.
There's a lot of documents, but what they really show is sort of a rampant corporate culture that has no interest in looking at whether or not their product is safe, but have an interest in attacking science that doesn't suit their business agenda. At least starting 20 years ago, Monsanto has known that their product can cause cancer and has gone out of its way to ignore it and or fight any science that suggests a link. And we see this happening amongst all the independent scientists that have looked at this, and there's hundreds of them. And a lot of scientists, when we first got involved in this litigation, said, listen, I think it causes cancer, but I can't help you. I don't want to fight Monsanto. They're bullies. And that's what the documents show. Some of the evidence that we showed a jury about Monsanto was a very kind of unhealthy and kind of creepy relationship between Monsanto and the regulators at the EPA. We had text messages, email conversations where various EPA employees are actually going out of their way to stop other agencies from investigating this issue and going out of their way to sort of gain approval from Monsanto.
The fact that the biggest company called Monsanto is now merging with Bayer will make this problem of manipulation of knowledge of science more important. That is why alternatives have to be built, because when they get that big, they'll be even bigger in terms of regulation. In spite of all the scientific evidence, in spite of repeated proof that there's a connection between glyphosate and the kidney failure disease in Sri Lanka and in Guatemala, all that these criminals know how to do is topple a government, get a scientist driven out of their lab. We need to find ways to deal with them, and the only way is new alliances between citizens and scientists, new alliances between governments at all levels, where local governments use their power to make decisions about our health and start banning these chemicals. This is the time to really create Earth democracy.